So over the last few months, we've been talking about the journey towards spiritual awakening. So I want to continue with that today. And I want to talk about compassion, which is a really big part of your spiritual awakening. So compassion is not something that is a nice thing to have. It's essential for us to have as human beings. So when we're born with instincts, and those instincts are survival instincts. And it's my understanding that compassion is part of those survival instincts because we are social animals. We need to interact with other human beings. Compassion helps us to build relationships and to interact with other human beings. If we didn't have compassion, we wouldn't be interacting. And that will play a big role in bringing our mental health to a very low point. So compassion is vital, essential, not just for your spiritual path, but for your life in general. So what is compassion? So I would say that compassion is having the sensitivity to see the suffering in yourself and in others, and having a desire or a wish to reduce or alleviate that suffering. So it means compassion is in two parts. The first part is the feeling part. So that's having the sensitivity to recognize the suffering in ourselves and the suffering in other people. Now here, the word suffering, I'm not just talking about physical suffering. I'm talking about emotional, psychological suffering as well. So the word suffering covers all of that. So it's not just like physical pain, but it's like discontentment, dissatisfaction, unease, strong emotions, overwhelming thoughts. All of that comes under the umbrella of suffering. So the first part of compassion is having the sensitivity to spot that. The second part, which is even more important, is doing something about it. So if we just stop at the first part of, oh yeah, that's terrible, or how sad, then that's not going to help anybody. It won't help you, and it's not going to help the person who's suffering. Or if you're suffering, it won't help you. We have to have the second part. So the first part is a noun. The second part is a verb, it's doing something. So do something to alleviate that suffering, or at least try your best to reduce the suffering of yourself and for other people. So that's why I say that compassion is so vital for us in this world. If you just stop a moment and just envisage a world without compassion, it's an awful thing. It means that we'd be even more selfish than we are. And let's face it, there's a lot of selfishness in the world. We would be more intolerant than we are. And you can have a look around. Intolerance is growing. So it would mean that people don't care. You wouldn't care about other people. They don't care about you. So that's not a world that we want to live in. It's not a world that we want our children or our grandchildren to grow up in. So having a compassionate heart and doing something about that compassion, putting it into action, is hugely important. So there are 5 aspects of compassion. So the first part is sensitivity. If we don't have that sensitivity, then we're not going to spot compassion. We're not going to spot that other people are suffering. So that sensitivity is like having a bit of vulnerability, really. It's making ourselves vulnerable. It's making ourselves open-minded and open-hearted to the suffering of other people and ourselves. So in your compassion, you need that sensitivity. Because if you've not got that sensitivity, you're not going to spot the suffering of other people. The second aspect of compassion is sympathy. Now, sympathy has bad press, really, because people think sympathy is about pity. And in a lot of ways it is. Sympathy is more about you than it is about the other person. But the sympathy I'm talking about here is the sympathy that's going to open up your heart. Open up your heart so you do something about the suffering in yourself or in other people. So we need that sympathy. It's like the motivation to push us forward to actually do something. So we've got the sensitivity. So I'm sensitive to this suffering that's going on. The sympathy is automatic. It comes automatic to us. And that sympathy is going to motivate us to actually try to do something about that suffering. The third part of compassion is distress tolerance. Now, when we open ourselves up, when we become vulnerable, it can be painful. You know, when you see some of the suffering in the world, it can be so painful. Even our own suffering is painful. But when we look around the world today, the people who are being killed in Ukraine and Russia and Gaza and Israel and Sudan and other places around the world, then it really does touch us and it can be painful for us. So we need to have that distress tolerance. We need to have a tolerance that we're not going to shy away, because if you don't have that tolerance, it's quite easy for us to just like block it out, suppress it, or distract yourself from it. So we need to have a certain amount of tolerance. The fourth aspect of compassion is empathy. So whereas sympathy was automatic, empathy is not. So empathy means trying to put yourself in the place of the other person. So I said sympathy is about you. Empathy is about them. So it's trying to see from their perspective. So we all get blinded by our own perspective in life. We all get blinded by, you know, our own viewpoint and the way we see things. So when we're being empathic, we're trying to see it from their point of view, which is really, really important, because that person has had different backstory to ours. They have a different upbringing to us. Their life has been different to us. I'm not saying it's been worse. In a lot of cases, it probably is, but it's definitely been different to us. So the way we see the world is the way that we're brought up, our backstory. All the concepts, the biases, the beliefs, everything that we've been taught that has brought us to this point in our life. We have to try to put that to one side for a moment and try to understand that person. What is happening with that person? You know, maybe they're going through the same situation that we've gone through, but it doesn't mean that they can deal with it the same as we've dealt with it. You know, when we're trying to help people, so many people say, oh yeah, that happened to me and I did this. Great. Well done. You got through it. But it doesn't mean that's going to help the other person. So empathy means trying to understand them. And a great way to understand people is listen. Listen to them. What are they saying? Not necessarily trying to solve their problems. Maybe just be there to support them. But try to see it. Try to step out of your world into their world. Now, of course, 100% we can't do that. But we can do it 85, 90%. We can try to understand another person's viewpoint. Of course, it will be difficult. I remember I had a professor friend in Canada. Every year I would go and teach in Canada. He said there is no such thing as empathy. And we used to have he had a big deck looking out over a lake, and we used to sit there late in the evening debating, is there empathy, isn't there empathy? Of course, he never changed his mind, and I certainly didn't change my mind. But I do see his point of view, The empathy is not an easy thing. And sympathy, automatic. Empathy, not. You really have to try. But, just by trying is going to be helpful. Whether you can 100%, put yourself in their world, their situation, doesn't matter. If you're trying, it means you're then thinking about them and you're not thinking about you. So empathy is all about the other person. Sympathy was about you, and it was about motivating you and opening up your heart. Empathy is about the other person. So the fifth and the final part of compassion is non-judgment. So non-judgment doesn't mean that your perspective doesn't count. It doesn't mean that what you think or what you believe doesn't matter. It matters. But again, what we're trying to do is not judge that other person, what they're going through. Maybe to you, it is so trivial. Maybe you've had such a difficult life where you've gone through so much in your life that you look at that and you think, really? That's what you're worried about? But for them, it's big. And we need to understand that if they're going through something, it is big for them. Maybe it's not for you. So we need to be non-judgmental. We need to not criticize them. We need to understand them. If you're going to judge another person, you're not going to help them. There's no way when you're judging them thinking, oh, really, that's it? You're not going to help them because you think they don't need help. That's just a trivial thing. So being non-judgmental is so important. So when we talk about compassion, we are talking about these 5 aspects. So we're talking about having a sensitivity towards suffering. Remember, compassion is for us as well, so not just other people. So we have a sensitivity. We have that sympathy, which is going to motivate us to move forward, open up our hearts. The more that we do that, the more we can move forward. Then we have to have this tolerance, understand that, it can be painful. Compassion can be painful. Compassion, a lot of the time when you become more and more compassionate, when you're meditating, you can cry. I don't know why, but it's just that overwhelming sense of compassion can, bring the tears to your eyes. That's a good thing, I think, because that really means, for me, it means that, you're really connecting with compassion. So you need that tolerance. You need empathy to be able to understand the other person. And you need to be non-judgmental. So those 5 make up compassion. So compassion is not a simple thing. If you can see, if you break it down into its elements, it is quite a big thing. Now, we just use that word, compassion. And I know that if I ask any of you here, are you compassionate? You would all say, yes, I am. We all would. Everybody says, yes, I'm compassionate. But we're compassionate to the people we want to be compassionate to. And the people we believe don't deserve compassion, we don't give it. So then that is not compassion. That's discrimination. Who are we to judge? I just said the last part of compassion is non-judgmental. And here we are. I'll give them compassion. They're good people. I'm not going to give them compassion because I think they're bad people. Why do we do that? We do that because we totally misunderstand compassion. Compassion is not about people's behavior. If people do something wrong, they will face the consequences of that. There are laws for that. We are not talking about that. We're not talking about using compassion as some sort of judgment system. It's not about that. Compassion is about a human being. They are a human being. They have done wrong. We have all done wrong. We've all done things in our life that we're not proud of or we shouldn't have done. We all do that. So when we have compassion, it has to be for all beings. If it's not for all beings, then it's more like discrimination than compassion. And again, that makes compassion difficult. The person who does wrong, we don't have compassion. The person who's been wronged, we instantly have compassion. But we need compassion for both types of people because we're looking at the human being. We're not looking at behavior. So don't misunderstand compassion. It is nothing at all to do with behavior. It is to do with a human being. That person that's done wrong, we don't know their backstory. We don't know what has led up to that point. But we know they're human and we know they're suffering. And so we should have compassion for them. Now, compassion is a big word that envelopes lots of other things like interconnectedness. So when we have compassion, it's because we understand the interconnected nature of all of us. We're all interconnected. We talk about, yes, individuals, and particularly in the West, we are brought up to be individuals. But it's a joke. It's a fallacy. You're not an individual. I mean, when you're sick, who looks after you then? Doctors and nurses. Who keeps us safe? Policemen. Who feeds us? Farmers. You know, when we were babies, how did we survive? Through our parents. How did we become intelligent? Through teachers. We are not individuals. There is no way. If you think you're an individual, you're fooling yourself. We are interconnected. We're all interconnected beings. We need each other. Without that interconnectedness, we would not survive. Where are you going to grow your vegetables? You know, most of you live in the city. Where are you going to grow your veg then? On your balcony in a little window box? What are you going to grow there? You know, if you're sick, how will you look after yourself? You know, if somebody attacks you, who's going to protect you? We need each other. So underneath that umbrella of compassion is that interconnectedness, that we are all one. You know, most of the hatred and the intolerance and the war and all the killings that go on would disappear if we just saw each other as human beings. Instead of looking and seeing the color of the skin, or seeing the gender, or seeing the religion, or seeing the nationality. Put it all to one side. You're a human being. If we just saw each other as human beings, we could never harm. You couldn't, because they are exactly the same as us. Remember, every human being wants to be happy and have a peaceful mind. No human being wants to suffer. No human being. You haven't woken up this morning, oh yeah, well, it's Sunday, I hope I suffer today. Nobody does that. So we're all the same, aren't we? You know, you all want to be happy, don't you? You all want to have a good life and a peaceful mind. None of you want to suffer. So it's irrelevant, your skin color, your gender, your sexual orientation, your nationality. They are just added on underneath. You are just human beings. And if we can see that interconnectedness, then it means we're never going to harm people. That's part of compassion. Also, part of compassion is mindfulness. Because if we're not being mindful, so mindfulness means aware. I'm aware. If I'm not aware of my own thoughts and feelings and emotions and behavior, and if I'm not aware of what is happening around me, then how am I going to have compassion? Where am I going to get that sensitivity from? So mindfulness is also a really important part of having compassion for people. Another part is forgiveness. We've all made mistakes. I know I've made quite a few, and there's lots of people who've made mistakes against me. We need to forgive. Remember, forgiveness is not acceptance and saying that, yeah, I'll lie down and let people walk over me. It's not about that. Forgiveness is about you, so you can move forward. So we need to forgive, because if we don't forgive, if we hold on and we hold grudges and we resent people, where's the compassion in that? So forgiveness is also a big part of compassion. So when we talk about compassion, it isn't such just a little thing, is it? It isn't just like, oh, being kind. Yeah, kindness is also there under the umbrella of compassion, loving kindness, not wanting people to suffer, wanting people to be happy. That's kindness. So compassion is those 5 aspects. And probably if you wanted to look deeper, you could probably have more than 5, but I think 5 really, shows us just how complicated compassion is and just how we can become compassionate. Remember that compassion is not about behavior, it's about human beings. And compassion, if you want to build compassion, you need to start understanding the interconnected nature of all beings. Because if you just see yourself as individuals, if you just see yourself as Europeans or Americans or Indians, or if you just think your skin is this color or I'm this gender, then you're never going to build compassion. Compassion can only come when we understand the interconnected nature. So I could go on and on and on about compassion, but I won't. I think that's enough for today.